Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly on Thursday, the 20th of November 2025. I'm your host, Barry Gallagher, and as always, I'm joined by Stuart Duggan. Stuart, how are you?
I'm good, Barry. Thank you for having me. There is lots to get through. It's not all pleasant, but I look forward to piecing it all together with you.
And also joined by Scott Fleming. Scott, how's things with you?
Aye, all right. Was in Manchester last weekend, and then had one of those horrible 72-hour hangovers, and now,
Oh,
now I'm just a bit feeling like a functional human being again. I'm ready to,
do it all
uh,
again this weekend.
yeah, basically, aye. But no, it's obviously a really big run of fixtures coming up, even though uh, with all the issues going on in the background, we haven't doesn't seem like the most important thing, but lots to talk about definitely.
Yeah, just before we get into the opening question, I think Stuart Scott says there, I think I saw something today that the next international break isn't till kind of towards the end of March. And there's something like 30 games. I think Kieran Tierney mentioned that. There's like 30 games, I think, roughly. Maybe just short of 30 games, but in that sort of ballpark. It seems an awful lot, doesn't it? But that's where um, that's where things are won and lost, I would guess. I would suggest.
That does seem like a lot. You've shocked me and alarmed me with that news. But yeah, the return of the football feels weird because maybe at the start of the window, I actually felt quite excited and positive about where we'd be at the end of this international break, and now I'm kind of dreading coming back to it, and it almost feels more chaotic than ever. Uh, but you would hope that maybe over the next couple of weeks we're going to get some stability and some excitement, and then start to generate some momentum. And maybe by the time you have another international break, everything will look considerably different at the club. But it's so hard to tell where we actually are at. But I guess that's what we're here to thrash out.
Yes, indeed. So we'll get straight into the opening question then. So, with what Stuart says in mind, Scott, I'll come to you first. Is this the most turmoil we've faced as a club since the McCann takeover in 1994?
I think it's certainly up there. For me, I find it hard to look beyond COVID. I think now that there's a couple of years of distance between now and then, it maybe doesn't seem as quite as bad, but it really was
Oh,
so
it was awful. Yeah.
it was so grim at the time for so many different reasons on and off the pitch. So comparing that period to this period, I think the reality is that at Celtic, much like many other football clubs and fan bases, there are people who uh, that will only really be interested in what's happening on the pitch. And for those people, I think they certainly won't think it's great at the moment, but they maybe won't think it's terrible either. Like we have seen worse Celtic seasons in all of our lifetimes. Like we've still got a chance of winning the league. We've got a cup final in a couple of weeks. We're still in Europe, etc. So uh, it's not quite that sort of fatal combination that we had in the COVID season of just being so bad, as I say, on and off the pitch. But yeah, definitely, I can't remember a season like this before where it feels like there are just different fires going off all over the place from week to week to week. Even just earlier this week, I would say my mood was fairly positive compared to how I felt for most of this season, just because I was beginning to sort of buy into some of the Wilfried Nancy hype and do all my research on him and listen to interviews with him and stuff. And then obviously, as we'll talk about in a minute, all the stuff that's came along with the board and the Green Brigade and the way that's erupted over the last couple of days. Again, it just sours the mood heading into a really big game on Saturday. But the thing I probably would say is, like we've talked about it before this season, that the fact that it's a difficult process, the protests, but ultimately it will hopefully be a good thing because it will hopefully it will hopefully lead to meaningful change, and it has had to happen for a long time. So that's very much how I'm trying to look at it. Ultimately, I don't think the likes of Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay, for example, I don't think they're any worse at their jobs today than they were 2 or 3 years ago. I think there's just much more of a spotlight on it now. And as I say, that's a good thing because ultimately we don't want these people still to be running the football club in 6, 12, 18 months' time. So it is hopefully short term pain for long term gain. But yeah, there certainly haven't been many other periods like it. I wouldn't say it's the worst since 1994, but it's definitely up there.
Yeah, I think that's all valid points, and I suppose, Stuart, from my sort of perspective, if I compare it to the COVID season, is that it didn't have to be like this. Like, we've got all the money in the bank. We have some really good players. If we think back to how proud we were, I know we speak about that a lot, how proud we were after the Bayern game 9 months ago. It seems crazy that it's still this calendar year. And then just a lot of it seems, you often hear that phrase that the biggest threat to Celtic is Celtic themselves, and that kind of feels more true by the day. So in terms of a sort of standing start, it feels that this is all self-inflicted, which perhaps the other examples haven't. It's kind of been stuff done to Celtic, but this kind of feels like this is all I'm doing.
Certainly in relation to the COVID season, for example, that its context is the biggest thing. That Celtic were dreadful on and off the pitch, but certainly I was just about to try and justify some of it. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of that, but everyone, yeah, I know, everyone was having a lot of challenges, and you could understand to a degree why you might have expected that to be, a point of turmoil. The frustrating thing, and it's frustrating bringing up the Bayern game, but I was thinking about that on the way home, that it not only is it less than a calendar year, but you're right, it's still the same calendar year since that happened. And it's astonishing how far the club has fallen just in status, from potentially knocking on the door of the last 16 of the Champions League, quarterfinals, last 16 of the Champions League, to now how we've performed. If you look at the Midtjylland game, for example, just where we're at as a team on the pitch. But just everything that has been there has now just all kind of come out in the wash. As Scott says, the performance of the board today is no worse or better than it was 2 or 3 years ago, but going through this process of really shining a light on it, having the transfer window that you did, having all the situation with Rodgers, just everything about it feels so avoidable, with even like having not actively bad, management from the club would be, considerably better than where we are just now and what we have. And I keep thinking about it in the context of not only how far we've fallen, but just how difficult it makes everything at this point for a new manager coming in to the club. So at a point where you could possibly get a clean slate, and maybe just naively, I sort of started to think that you were seeing things turn with regards to just getting some results from the protest. With last week, maybe it was, when the new fronts of the stadium went up and the fan survey comes out, and it looks like, yeah, they're very hurriedly getting everything done before the AGM, but it is getting done, and it's probably getting done because of the protests and because of the, you have to presume, tangible effects that they're seeing from the Not Another Penny campaign. But now, with everything that's kind of kicked off in the last 48 hours, with the lack of communication about the manager, with the lack of communication about so many things, it's really evident that not a lot has changed. Unless tomorrow we really are in for an absolutely blockbuster day where Celtic 2.0 is revealed and all the changes are kind of outlined and implemented. I just think we've got some ways to go, and Scott's right to highlight that it's just part of the process, and protesting for change is always an uncomfortable protest. It's often a slow process, and the worst part about uncomfortable situations is that they're not particularly comfortable, and you just have to sort of suck it up. And I think we're seeing different facets of it, but with every sort of misstep that the board continually take, it only underlines and emphasises the need to continue on in the path that we've kind of set on until you do see that meaningful change. So it's just very difficult, very self-inflicted, and there are some sort of green shoots, but then also there's clearly very, very toxic and deep-rooted things happening there that need to change.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll come on to kind of list some of them. But Scott, in terms of, I kind of think this podcast will be a wee bit sort of, won't follow the usual path, but if we think about the club in turmoil, as I think we can all agree that it is, the fact that we don't have a manager coming up for 4 weeks now that we haven't. And a new manager coming in, if it is going to be Wilfried Nancy, coming in behind in the league, a really threadbare squad, all the sort of disharmony off the pitch as well. I think it's a point that any new managers are risk, but particularly one who is, I think he's very sort of, he's got such a defined way of playing where we maybe don't have those players. Do you think that there's ever been a more challenging start to a Celtic manager's, a potential Celtic manager's career as a manager of the club when so many things are going against them, or going against the club rather?
Not many. Obviously, you can find some parallels with when Ange took over in terms of the bad feeling between the fans and the board and the state the squad was in, and the fact that in the short term, at least during that first season, he did have to rely on some players who obviously weren't going to be part of his plans long term, like Turnbull and Ralston and all of these guys, and having to sort of put square pegs in round holes and just carry it along on a wave of just sheer momentum, and yeah, that's a difficult part of it for him. He not only needs to get a grip of it really quickly tactically, and motivate these players and get results across a really heavy fixture schedule early on, but he needs to, he sort of needs to inspire everyone, and I mean, it's a lot to ask, but he sort of needs to inspire everyone and lift the mood of the fans as well. So yeah, it's a very difficult, very sort of multifaceted challenge. But I think the part that would encourage me, I listened to one of his podcast appearances the other day. It was with that Men in Blazers podcast, and he was talking about how quite often in American football, you kind of want to rip up your squad and start again, but you can't really because of the way the transfer system works there and the sort of two-tier wage structure and stuff like that. So he was saying you have to develop players, you have to work with players who maybe wouldn't in an ideal world be part of your plans. And he was talking about how he enjoys that, and that I found that quite encouraging because, you know, if you like working with squads full of like non-functional football players who are low in confidence, then have we got a football club for you? But yeah, it's a really difficult challenge, and I mean the scary part is after what the Columbus Crew general manager came out and said today is it might not be the done deal that we've all been hoping and assuming it is anyway. So that's another thing to keep an eye on over the next few days, I suppose.
Yeah, Stu, just as Scott says there, so they're what's his name? I think I'll just bring it up here. He said that he hasn't given Celtic the permission to talk to Wilfried Nancy because they haven't asked. And I know that these things can often be done sort of cloak and dagger, and agents talk to coaches and stuff like that, but it had gone, as you said. I know, Stuart, that you were personally, you'd kind of looked into him, and you were quite keen on him and coming around to the idea and quite positive. But is that a worry that the club are saying that, or is that just things that football clubs will say to kind of appease their own fan base?
I think for other clubs it wouldn't be something to worry about, but I think having watched this film before a few times, we're not talking about how Eddie Howe's start at Celtic was, as an example, and we're not talking about the striker that we signed, or the left back, just because we really needed them as well. I think that I've been really interested to see this week how the dominoes are all going to fall. Obviously, the board have thrown in a couple of extra dominoes in the last sort of 24 hours, which maybe hadn't quite expected. But I sort of thought, you're hearing rumours that, you know, he's not going to be in charge until Hibs or Dundee. And I think that so much of what the Celtic board are doing currently is crisis PR and optics. And I think that the optics of a new manager coming in who has a new system and plays quite a radically different way going into 3 very difficult away games and potentially not starting very well is not good. But the optics of announcing a manager and then not allowing him to start are not very good. And so I'm just really curious. I also think the optics of having an AGM, having not appointed a manager in 4 weeks, are not very good. So I really thought that it was going to be like maybe a sort of slightly staggered or a sort of thing where you get an announcement and they basically hide behind the shield of potentially good feeling that a new manager is coming, that a new dawn is coming to the club, and that could be their human shield for the AGM. It doesn't look like that's going to happen unless we get something tonight or early tomorrow. So I think they leave themselves wide open for criticism about that, and it doesn't really help Wilfried Nancy either. If it's not him, I think we're absolutely fucked, just because I have no idea who they're going to pull out or what they've been doing for the last 4 weeks. And I really worry about what would be the long-term vision for the club and what would be the long-term vision even for, January and how we move forward. I think what I've been trying to do is just almost take a back seat and just wait and see how it plays out. I think if it was to be Wilfried Nancy, I'd be very interested, enthused, excited. I think that it's a lot. I know there's been a lot of conversation about him. I know everyone's got their opinions. I think he actually ticks a lot of boxes for what a lot of Celtic fans would want, and those that it doesn't will be screaming at me right now, I'm sure, saying, how can you possibly have a coach with 4 years experience who's only been in America, come and manage a club like Celtic? But I think we want new ideas. We want to play more exciting football. I think we're crying out for someone who has this cult of personality that could unite the club, and for all his failings in terms of experience, that does appear to be the one thing that he has in spades, is that he's extremely charismatic, he's extremely likeable, and has been extremely respected by players, fans and staff alike pretty much everywhere he's been. He has also done well everywhere he's been, and everywhere he's been, the players and teams have got better considerably, whether it's record points tallies, record goals tallies. In that short period of time, you are seeing him getting improvements, and I think that's not really to be knocked either, irrespective of what level you are at, because you can only really do what's put in front of you. And obviously, when you come to Celtic, you'll be judged by those metrics, and as well you should. It's a very, very difficult start, though, as you say. I think that perhaps Ange would edge him just because there are players there that you can rely on and hopefully get a tune out of, which Ange didn't necessarily have. He had a squad that was really, really on its bare bones and really struggling to get by. They both had injury crisis to deal with. That's obviously not helping matters. But I think more than anything, I just want clarity about it. If they find a way to release a statement to say he's the guy, he's not starting for 2 weeks, however they choose to sell that bad news, I'm happy to know where we're going and what's happening. But I think not having any communication about it, the longer that goes on, the more you do start to worry. And yeah, you start to think that, there hasn't been any wholesale change at the club and we are just incapable of doing the most fundamental things.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And just, Scott, just the kind of quotes from, I don't know if it was Isatol or Isotal. He said, I was told there was a report that we gave permission to Celtic, but in order to get permission, you have to ask. We haven't had anything from that particular club. We never received something official. I'm not saying it couldn't come into my mailbox in the next hour, but for now, we haven't heard anything. It just kind of does make you feel like what is going on, because as Stuart has kind of pointed out there, that we have had recent experience of this, and the failings of the club are out there for all to see. And I kind of feel that those sort of board apologists who we'll maybe come on to, who will say, oh, the Green Brigade issue, if that wouldn't have happened to me as a fan, the kind of selfish way of looking at it, but even they must admit, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, as Stuart says, we should have had the manager appointed for this AGM. This should have been an easy one for the board to sort of bat away any questions about that because the manager would have been in post. But they can't even do that, right? So I kind of feel like tomorrow has the potential to be catastrophic for the board. I'm certainly hoping it is, but things like this don't help them one bit, I don't think.
Yeah, I think the guys spoke about it in the pod the other day, the one where Martin and Christian were on, the idea that like it would be the board's dream scenario if they could make the appointment the day before or even on the day of the AGM, and then that just overshadows everything and you ride into it on that sort of wave of good feeling. So I'm sure they've been doing absolutely everything they can to finalise the appointment for that deadline. But as we saw in the summer, they're not very good with deadlines or getting anything done in any sort of timely fashion. So yeah, the stuff with the it's at all comments, hopefully it is just some sort of negotiation tactic, some sort of gambit. But as Stu says, it wouldn't be a problem for a normal football club, but for a club like us, who have constantly just left authority figures at other football clubs bemused by our behaviour and by our negotiation tactics in recent transfer windows, it wouldn't surprise you if we haven't, dotted all the I's and crossed the T's with us, and we have done something which could potentially undo the whole thing. But yeah, I have to say, I'm one of those Celtic fans. Normally, the AGM, I don't pay a huge amount of attention to it. I'll read the kind of summation of what went on an hour or two afterwards. I'll see little bits on social media, and but tomorrow I'm absolutely engrossed. I can't wait for it, and are we going to see real meaningful change? Are the Celtic Trust's motions going to be passed, for example? Probably not. But what we really want to see is pressure being exerted, and we want to see the board squirming in a way that they never have in an AGM before. And I really think we are going to see that.
Yeah, just before I bring Stuart in, I almost feel like this is more, and it's crazy to say this, but the AGM tomorrow is more exciting than the game on Saturday. And I never thought I would say that, but only if it is to see the board squirm. Stu, you want to come in?
Yeah, just that with the sort of general air of catastrophe around Celtic at the moment, my only thing, I don't want to sort of take us away from talking about the AGM. My only thoughts on the Nancy stuff not hitting a snag is that I think that someone would have briefed it by now. If there was word that it wasn't happening, or if they hadn't done whatever, I think someone like Stephen McGowan would absolutely have wind of it and would love nothing more than to bury someone for it, because there's just clearly been members of the press that have quite rightly revelled in that sort of thing, and it's certainly not like the Scottish mainstream media to not enjoy ramping up pressure on Celtic ahead of big games. So that's one thing that I'm kind of clinging to, but I would really like to know what the fuck's going on just generally, because there's so many easy things that the board could have done to start appeasing fans. Obviously, I mentioned that they sort of ticked off one or two things from the sort of big list of questions that had been put to them. I think just communication in general needs to be better, and it can't be just falsifying versions of events in long statements. I would quite like to just hear the bread and butter stuff, like who is the manager of the football club.
Yeah, I don't think that's too much to ask. Got some questions about the AGM, and just to make you aware that there will be an AGM reaction pod tomorrow. That'll be out tomorrow afternoon, and so stay tuned for that. Couple of questions. Scott, this one comes from Kevin. He said, "Evening, hope everyone is doing good. My question for the AGM would be, why are the club and the board so beholden to one man who isn't the owner? He runs the club on a whim, such as the decision to let Rodgers go, bring O'Neill back. That's all Desmond. The CEO and the chairman have said nothing about it either. It's also been Sed's choice. I'm genuinely baffled as to why he has free rein over our club." And I think that's a question that's kind of on everyone's lips, and it's difficult to answer.
Yeah, I think it speaks to Dermot Desmond's ego and his sort of main character syndrome, to use an overused modern phrase, because for much of his time at Celtic, he's almost been seen as a sort of absentee landlord, and he could just be in the background at this point while Nicholson and Lawwell and everyone else is soaking up all the ill feeling. But he had to go and release that statement and after Rodgers' exit. So um, I really, yeah, I think obviously he's not going to be there tomorrow. He probably knows what would happen if he is, but increasingly it just seems like such a malign influence.
Yeah, definitely. Stuart, your thoughts on that? Like, I saw a funny sort of meme today, and it was about um, if we had appointed Nancy before tomorrow, and it was a picture of him and Desmond, and Nancy was saying, "I'll see you at the AGM," and he says, "No, I don't go to those," and it's so true. Do you think he will be there tomorrow?
I'd be very, very surprised if that was the case. I mean, you're probably going to have to prize Michael Nicholson out of the corner of whatever bedroom he's sitting in, because that's where the fuck's he been? Sorry, Michael, you do have to attend tomorrow. Yeah, unfortunately, that is literally your job. I think that with regards to Desmond, we're so boxed in. I think in the list of achievable goals from this protest movement, unfortunately, unseating him or removing him is it's very, very extremely unlikely. And I don't think pressure and I don't think you're going to get any change out of him. I think that's just the nature of who he is. I think there's lots more that can be done to try and curb his powers, or make him more, have people that hold him to account a little better than, as I say, Michael Nicholson, etc. So for the time being, he just remains this insane rich man, and that's shite. But it kind of is what it is as well. Yeah. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
No, it's okay. Just when you were saying about very rich man, it made me think when Neil Lennon said he's never met a sharper or more intelligent person in his life. um,
More fool me then.
yes. This one from Ken. He says, "Hello, gang. What the fuck is going on with this board? No communication with the Nancy team. Raids out and out war against the fans. Will the AGM turn out to be a good thing for us, or will they cut it short and say they don't feel safe? It should be if they attack one of us, they attack all of us. Hail, hail, up the dubs." Now, Scott, the Celtic Collective put out a statement today. Again, this will be covered in more detail on the pod tomorrow, but it does feel like sort of all-out war against the Green Brigade. I know that there was on raids this morning. Charges of breach of the peace, I believe, were issued, but it just feels like it just adds to the bad feeling all around the club, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if this has happened in exactly the way that the Celtic Collective describes it happening, and obviously we've got no reason not to believe them, then it's jaw dropping, really. I mean, I think we've all been up in arms about so many things that the board have said and done over the last few months, the structural issues, the transfer issues, the lack of communication, etc. But if they actually are if there are actually dawn raids being carried out for people who are accused of breach of the peace, and the club have facilitated that, I just find that staggering. It's quite sinister, really. Um, and we talked about it earlier, the fact that the board almost just can't help but constantly just stepping on rakes at the moment, like Sideshow Bob. Like this story has really, really, a couple of weeks ago when the first statement went up on the website, it was quite a big deal, but maybe it wasn't at the kind of set code of the news agenda at the time. And now with the statement that went out last night, and the Celtic Collective follow up today, it feels like it's really sort of a defining storyline heading into tomorrow. And again, like the wording of the Desmond statement about Rodgers was obviously quite unhinged, but I thought the wording of the statement the other night, which presumably wasn't written by Desmond, was again just so sort of unprofessional and quite vindictive, really. So that I think says whether Nicholson was the main person behind the drafting of that. It certainly read a little bit like the one that came out after the transfer window shut. So it does just speak to a really sort of entrenched level of dysfunction there across the entire board.
Yep,
It,
Stuart.
it just feels extremely personal as well. And it seems like at a time when the club literally don't have a manager, is this the best use of anyone's time or resources to further fuel division, to, as you say, the implication, I think, is that there's been collusion with the club and the police for something that they don't really have. I mean, it sounds like the proof that they have is the footage that they really unprofessionally attached to that initial statement. Is that the best use of their time? And if they are so absolutely certain about this, is the best time to put this important information out at the kickoff of like the most important game in the national team's recent history, where you could qualify for World Cup? It's just absolute rat behaviour, and I'm just so extremely cynical about everything they do. Some things which we'll talk about, some things which I don't think we should talk about, but just all the messaging from the club, to whether they're, obviously they're at pains in that. I think it's actually probably the first time that they really actively acknowledge wider fan protests. I know that they've obviously released the minutes from the meeting and stuff like that, but there still isn't much of an acknowledgement that things aren't great. And I feel like the most communication you've had from that is either from Brendan Rodgers when he was here, or Martin O'Neill, who've had to field questions on it, because obviously until tomorrow, those at the centre of it haven't really done so publicly. But I just feel like, they're at pains to say, oh, it's got nothing to do with the wider fan protest, but I almost feel like maybe the Green Brigade they're carrying the can for that, or whether it's the banners, the statements, anything like that. They just feel like you can't target the whole fan base, but that is a collective or an organisation that you can, and they have the mechanisms, they think, to do so. But whether it's the three people, the notion of collective punishment for the whole section, it's crazy stuff, really draconian stuff, and obviously harks back to really unpleasant sort of period of history. And where does it all end, really, is the worry now.
Yeah, I think just as Stuart sort of outlines there, Scott, it kind of feels almost like divide and conquer, like pin the blame for this incident on the Green Brigade and use it to sort of discredit the wider movement. And to some extent, it does seem to be working. I know that you can't go much on social media comments, but you do see responses to the tweet that went out from the Cynic today, just like, oh, it doesn't affect me, kind of, I'm all right, Jack. But it's important that I think we don't lose sight of what we want, and that's real change. So I would hope that people wouldn't fall for this sort of tricks by the board.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if I think there is an element within the Celtic sport who just look at the Green Brigade and they just think, oh, they're just on Eds, and they get and they get all the credit for the atmosphere, but they don't, they're not held accountable for when they do misbehave or whatever. And I almost wonder, it's something the board have probably been building up to over the last few years, and I wonder if they are thinking the time is now, and they're sort of overplaying their hand almost, and assuming that that section within the Celtic support is larger than it maybe is. The section who are just fed up with the Green Brigade. But yeah, it's when it comes down to credibility, and ultimately, it's a short, very blurry, quite unclear clip that they released. So unless you were there on the night, I don't think anyone can say with clear confidence exactly what happened. So whose word are you inclined to take at the moment? I wouldn't be inclined to take Celtic's word at the moment. I probably wouldn't be inclined to take Police Scotland's word about anything. So yeah, and even just I wanted to touch on this the security advisory group thing as well. Uh, just how Weasley that is to be like, to say, oh, we asked if the Green Brigade representative could come along to it, but it's not up to us. Right? It's almost like when your mate gets invited to an empty when you're growing up or something, and you're like, oh, can you put in a word for me? Can I come as well? And he's like, oh, I asked. You're like, did you really ask? Did you actually try? So yeah, I, it's it's not in good faith, put it that way.
Yeah, and sorry, Sean, you go.
I'm just going to say nothing about the messaging appears to be in good faith because they're very much trying to plant and steer this narrative. And as Barry says, you do start to see that it takes hold on social media. I've had quite a busy couple of days. I've not seen how much that sort of stuff has hit the mainstream media, but that's really dangerous as well. And you see it so much in the world now. I don't want to just be like hashtag fake news or whatever, but you do see that's how people in power stay in power, is they control narratives and they spin things to ways at which meet their convenience. And the lack of, see, if there was an incident, the nature of the incident, if there was some sort of due process, and if it was sort of played out behind closed doors on both sides, and then the findings were that, unfortunately, because of X, Y, and Z, this is the sort of way that things are going to proceed moving forwards, I think I would accept it and I would swallow it down and I would say, well, fair enough, like, someone shouldn't have done that, or maybe that's harsh or whatever, but to just post a video with, like, just so you know, this is actually why they're guilty, and so here you go. Well, I think this is an open and shut case, so we're just going to ban them for this length of time. And it was these individuals, but actually we're going to ban hundreds of season ticket holders, and yeah, it's going to be for another couple of games because of this, or actually it's going to be for the season just because we fancy it, because they said something that we didn't like, or because they sang a song we didn't like. And I know that there's this whole attitude of like, oh, it's not my problem, they're not taking my season ticket. But, if they can take one person's season ticket, they can take yours, and maybe they're not going to come and chuck you out for breach of the peace, but maybe they're going to build a fucking slightly bigger tunnel in front of your seat, or maybe they're going to move your season book and you're going to have nothing to do about it. And don't come crying when it's your turn to, face the wrong side of the hand on that one.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And yeah, I think you have to look at the bigger picture, not just kind of that sort of look inwards and just think about yourself, because that doesn't serve anyone well. As I say, there will be the podcast tomorrow in reaction to the AGM. I suppose the big thing, Scott, are the trust looking for the club to publish a strategic review with a 3 to 5 year plan. I don't think that's unreasonable, and also the no confidence in the Celtic board. So, as you mentioned earlier, it's you kind of can't help but look on and with expectation and hope. Whether it will come to fruition, I don't know, but I think the eyes of the Celtic support are going to be on the AGM tomorrow, more so than ever before.
Yeah, definitely. I'm quite looking forward to the pod tomorrow because you don't tend to hear too often from people who have actually been in the room. It will just be the Harry Brady tweet updates or whatever it is. So yeah, I I would be really interested to know. Clearly the board don't really think that there's been very little contrition, very little admission of wrongdoing at any point during this process. So I wonder if there will be an element of coming out fighting tomorrow, and what form that will take. But as we've seen, when they do that, they do just tend to sort of dig themselves deeper into a hole, as they did with the meeting with the collective a month or two ago. So yeah, it should be a lot more box office, and the usual stuff isn't going to quite cut it. The little sort of jokes that you tend to get from the top table and stuff about Rangers and whatever. That's not going to go down well, I would suspect.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as well. They're probably gutted. You'd imagine they rehearsed that in front of the mirror months in advance. So I'll wait to hear this one about penalty to Rangers or whatever.
Yeah.
The big news, I think, this week is to see what comes out of the AGM, and see how the board come out of it. In other news, Dan O'Day, Stuart, has been appointed Swansea's interim manager. Could you see that's something that could potentially become permanent if he does well?
Fuck knows, man. Based on their new recruitment team and their new striker, I'd be concerned with that. But I suppose it's quite good just to get minutes in the legs of managing at that level. O'Day's obviously got ambitions. and good luck to him. I don't really know how they're getting on. Presumably not that well, if he's been quite quickly brought into that position. But yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, that's it. Scott, I know that he was kind of highly thought of at Celtic, and obviously he had the job that Maloney got when he went down to Swansea. But could it be something that we keep an eye on for something in the future?
Yeah, possibly. Even if it is just a role that the one Maloney came in and took in the summer. He is someone who seems to have a good reputation and always comes across quite well. By the sounds of it, they were about to appoint a Swedish guy, and Middlesbrough beat them to it. So it sounds like almost a bit like the Maloney O'Neill situation. He's going to be in charge this weekend and possibly for no longer than that, which is a shame because, like Stuart, I would almost like to get a bit of a longer look at him and what he's all about. But yeah, there's only so much you can do when you've got Adam Ida up front. But I mean, we might have him to thank for that anyway. So fair play to him. Maybe we'll put him in a team and he'll start scoring goals, and we'll have written a sell-on clause, and we'll get even more money for him for old rope. But yeah, I'm quite interested to see how it goes for however long it lasts. But I suspect it won't be long.
I was
Yeah,
just going to say that I worry that the comparisons with Maloney are not accurate because he could be the Celtic manager for quite a while.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I suppose the big news this week, and we've kind of hinted at it, that it's usually you can't wait for international football to be over to get real football back. But Scott, in terms of Scotland and Ireland, it's been a pretty dramatic few days and late drama, and it just kind of makes you sort of fall in love with the game a wee bit more, I would suggest, because it was just drama and it was a kind of a throwback to sort of gung-ho attacking football.
Yeah, like the Irish one in particular, like that's just absolutely incredible. Like to get to the end of a campaign where they never looked close to qualifying or getting a playoff, and then to win your last two games in those circumstances against opponents as good as Portugal and Hungary, that's just unreal. Scotland, I still can't quite work out what happened. Like, did not play well once in the whole qualification campaign, but clearly they've got to a stage now, maybe unlike Scotland teams of the past, where they have got a massive winning mentality, but they've got one or two players who can provide those big moments of quality as well in big games as well. Like 3 of the 4 goals, which were just ridiculous. So yeah, I kind of have a bit of a strange relationship with Scotland nowadays. Like when I was growing up, it was massive for me. It was probably just as big a thing in my life as supporting Celtic was, and somewhere over the years that ratio has changed. And I was lucky enough to go to the Euros last summer. I really enjoyed it, but throughout this whole campaign, I have just found myself sort of not paying as much attention to it. And then obviously the other night was just incredible. But I was mainly just thinking of it like how much of a big deal it was for our generation, like Euro '96, World Cup '98. I think it's cool that a younger generation gets to sample that now, but I am already wondering about what sort of tactical war crimes Steve Clarke's going to commit next summer, if I'm really honest. But no, really good, obviously, to see the part that Kieran Tierney played in it in particular.
Yeah, that was just what I was going to kind of bring up. Stuart, I know Tierney's done an interview with Sky tonight, and he was saying he got quite emotional thinking about how the last few years have gone for him. And it was interesting he said about people kind of hammering him for his injury record, and that's maybe something you don't really think that gets through to the player, because it can be something when you're, to use the term, injury prone, but it is something that can be used to sort of lambast a player. And it's interesting to see that he just said he'll work hard to get back to his best, and that goal was phenomenal the other night.
Yeah, I was. I'm not like I'm a very fair weather Scotland fan where I'll happily jump on the bandwagon when it's getting going, but you're not going to catch me toiling away away games in Latvia and whatnot and friendlies. But I watched it and I thought it was incredible. It's as much joy as I've seen in a football game in a long, long time, particularly against the backdrop of the season that we've had, where some of the football has been torture and we just haven't had our problems to seek with off the field stuff. So, real genuine joy and emotion. Real, just a great. If you had no skin in the game, just an amazing football match to watch. And I was just so pleased that the real defining moment fell to Tierney. I know that McLean obviously gets a lot of plaudits and headlines for such an insane goal and as such a lamented player, but when the chips were really, really down, it was Tierney that produced the big moment, and that's like history. History will remember that, and I don't even know like what that's going to do for him now because I think Kieran Tierney's always been a great player. I think he's struggled, as most Celtic players have this season collectively, to maybe hit some of the heights. But if it can do something in terms of restoring some good feeling or confidence, then that's great for him. But just on a personal level, I was so pleased, obviously, that we got the winner, but to see that it was him was just really great. Obviously, the other side of the coin is real alarm bells ringing about our goalkeeper, but that's maybe saved for another day. Who knows?
Yeah, I was going to don't want to be one of those guys that mentions the booing of Schmeichel because I know that a lot of Celtic fans have told people to try and cheer up or whatever, but it didn't really sit well with me. But I think as Stuart says, Scott, it does kind of look like his days are numbered at top level football, and it's interesting because I think in the recent games for Celtic, he's been particularly good. I think the game at Hampden against Rangers, he was really good, but it does kind of feel like his days are coming to an end. Certainly at this level, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you see it with a lot of players, not just goalkeepers, when they get to that stage in their career. Like they could have two or three really good games in a row, but the next stinker is just around the corner, unfortunately. And with Michael, it's just been far too regular ever since the cup final blooper, really. And yeah, that was my sort of other than Tierney. Obviously, that was my biggest sort of Celtic related takeaway from it. The other night was just like the second the part he plays in the second goal. It's not the first time this season that he's looked really shonky at a corner. He certainly can't seem to handle it anymore when someone just stands at his toes and tries to unsettle him. And the fourth goal was just hilarious because I mean, final whistle's about to go anyway. I suppose it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but like, why is he not even trying to get back in his goal? Like, why? Like McLean, he makes McLean's mind up for him. McLean takes ages to decide he's going to shoot, and it's just like if you're just going to walk back at 1 mile an hour, then I might as well have a goal. Like, yeah, I'd be fascinated to see the new manager's take on it anyway, because Rodgers obviously one of those managers that just has his guys. He's always going to prefer the experienced players, the big name players. But we know that new managers, a lot of the time, they like to make statements. They like to make sweeping changes. And I would be really interested to see if that would be one of the first things Nancy would do is just to chuck Sinisalo in there.
Yeah, it's time will tell, I guess. And just the playoff draws were made today. So Ireland drew Czechia away, and if they get past them, they will play Denmark or North Macedonia. So it could be Scales and Kenny up against Schmeichel, and that if it comes to fruition. In terms of, and just one other thing today was that the statue for Tommy Gemmell. Construction is underway for that, and it's always good, Stuart, to kind of remember these guys who were heroes in Celtic's finest hour that they're remembered in their local communities.
Absolutely. I wasn't actually aware of that until I saw it in the rundown. So that's great to see. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty others that merit them, but very nice to see that's happening.
Yeah, I always like the story about Martin O'Neill said when he got the job the first time round, he got the Lions in and told them that he wanted them to have a more prominent role in the club. And he said to Gemmell about scoring a European final, and he said which one. Nice to have that.
But most of them must have at least half that team must have a statue now, I suppose. Like there's a McNeil statue, there's a Bobby Lennox statue in Saltcoats, isn't there?
Saltcoats Jinky at the stadium. Um, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
almost half. Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely something that it should be commemorated because it's something that will never be repeated again, unless something drastic really happens. Um, be nice to kind of think about football in Celtic because so much of what's kind of taking up our thoughts and airtime is the off the field things. But Stuart, it's probably not the easiest, as we mentioned. A lot of us thought that Wilfried Nancy would be in post for this game, but St Mirren away this time of the year, 8 o'clock on a Saturday. It's potentially one of the hardest fixtures that we'll face, certainly in the league.
Yeah, it is. It's brutal, and it's brutal because you just don't quite know the state of the squad. Obviously, Sebastian Tinekti didn't go away for international. Don't know if that was just like a rest. We don't really know the state of Kobe Donovan. We don't know where the rest of the players are in terms of their kind of fitness and rehabilitation. So it's a really difficult game. Hopefully, the fact that, it is still O'Neill and Maloney will at the very least provide the players with a bit of continuity. Hopefully the likes of Hatate, McGregor and Engels will have had rest and some additional training to continue the good work that they were doing before the break. And I think right now, as we still continue to just sort of float in limbo, it's just all about getting results. I think that even if we don't play particularly well, you would absolutely take a honking 1-0. I don't think it's a must-win game. I think between now and the start of January, we talked about this the other day, I think there's 3 must-win games for Celtic, and it's very much the Cup final, the Hearts game, and probably the next Rangers game. I think that there's going to be enough flux in the league campaign that you probably could drop points. Obviously, you don't want to, but I don't think they were quite at like do or die status, especially when you consider that you would hope within the next fortnight or so, the club are about to start on the first journey towards whatever this new era of the club will be with a new manager. But yeah, you want to win, and the way that the fixtures have shaken out this week, the option to put a little bit of pressure on Hearts when they've got a tricky on paper away game the next day would be really helpful. And as you say, just some good feeling around the club, just get back to winning, get back to playing, and maybe that buys everyone around the club a little bit of time while we figure all this out.
Yeah, Scott Stewart mentioned some of the injuries there, just to kind of run off ones off the top of my head. So obviously CCV, AJ, Jota, Osmond are the long-term ones. Obviously Sriracha got injured, Donovan I think he gets stretchered off for under-21s, but I don't know if you saw the footage today. I'm sure that he was with Tierney on the training pitch. I don't know. I'm sure it was Donovan, but that'll be confirmed. Obviously, Tereke, we don't know how long for, and Ian Atcho as well. So it makes the task even more difficult.
So I read the other day about Taneki that he had an issue, but on international duty, but I wasn't sure how bad it was. Does it sound like he's definitely going to miss this game? Then?
It said he was having 10 days of rest,
Right.
which, to be honest, like Tunisia had 3 games in that international break, so, and they were all friendlies or they were all inconsequential because they've qualified for the World Cup. So I think it was maybe just like any chance. And then with Donovan, I think that Donovan got a scan. I don't know where they were playing. They were playing somewhere in. I can't remember where they were playing, but
Gibraltar, wasn't it?
maybe yeah, he got a scan there, and there was like no break or anything, and so they just went back. So maybe he's like not fit to play, but maybe it's not a long-term injury. But luckily we've got that right back, Jemai Simpson-Pusey to deputise.
Yeah, that's it. Scott, that's a difficult question after what we just kind of ran through there, but potential lineup. The other thing, just before you come back in, was that Tierney was asked about this when he said that he isn't due back in till tomorrow. So would that maybe strengthen the case for Sinisawa to start? It might make the decision easier for O'Neill and save him like the awkward conversation.
Yeah, I don't know why that would have been really, but maybe it just still
He was
walking back,
literally in
still
Glasgow.
walking back towards his goal at Hampden. He hasn't quite reached it yet.
He's walking back
Uh,
from Hampden to Lennoxtown.
walk of shame.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's. I mean, we've kind of forgotten about him in the meantime because Kenny's been doing so well. But Ian Atchell's the one I'm kind of thinking like, when's he going to be back? It'd be good to have him back, just because even just as an option off the bench at the minute, because we are relying on Kenny massively at the moment. And I suppose the only alternative would be to move Dyson back in there, but I mean we've basically played him in every position already this season. But yeah, Donovan sadly I think is irrelevant anyway because it seems like this interim management team would prefer Ralston. And then I imagine it would be Trusty Scales, Tierney. Midfield would be interesting. Engels got dropped, obviously, didn't he, for Kelly, but then he comes on and gets the penalty and the really good assist. So I'd probably quite like to see Engels come back in. And then the front three, if Taneki's not there, I imagine it would be Dyson on the left and probably Jim Bag on the right.
yeah, that's true. Stu, anything you would change there? Would you maybe persist with Simpson Pusey over Ralston?
Um, I maybe would. I think that one of the reasons that they've gone for that is physicality. I think he's quite big. I think that we have been susceptible at set pieces and stuff like that. And I think that the comments that O'Neill made. I mean, in amongst the jokes about him after, where he was like, oh, he's definitely not a right back, and he was going to sub him off after 4 minutes and all that sort of stuff. As entertaining as that was, don't know what that does for his confidence, but I think that he is a really good player. Has a really good profile, maybe not to play right back, but he's comfortable on the ball and he adds physicality. I think you have to play your way into that. I would imagine that at St Mirren, it's going to be a very physical game, and perhaps that's why he would be considered a better option. I also wonder if maybe the nature of the goals in the Midtjylland game, they've just looked at Ralston and gone, it's not worth it. It's just not worth the risk.
That would make sense, but I just felt like that was a one game slap on the wrist type thing, bringing a JSP in. But I might be wrong, and I hope I am wrong.
I did have a hot take when Barry and I were out last week and we were talking about Nancy coming in, and I said that if he goes to a 3-4-3, that I think Jemai Simpson-Pusey will end up playing a very large part in our season.
Yeah,
So watch this space.
and there was some Inamura chat on the
little
pod
bit,
the other
yeah.
day, wasn't there?
That's unfortunately, you just have to accept these things if you will book Christian for podcasts, though. So part it just comes with it.
Yeah, that's it. In terms of St Mirren, they're actually not in the best of form, which just kind of scares me even more. I think they've won one in their last six, and I think that's right. Let me just check.
I've got it in my head of just like, oh, tough place to go, such a tough place to go. And then I had a look earlier on just to remind myself, and we really went there and humped them twice last season. So I'm probably just jinxing it even more now. But
Yeah,
our record is kind of decent there recently compared to what it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago when we had a 0-0 and a 2-0 defeat there under Ange, didn't we?
that's right. Yeah,
I'm still very much of the opinion, until otherwise it's proven to me, that when I watch Celtic, I just don't know what I'm going to get. And
Yeah. And St
perhaps,
Mirren are basically a kind of off-brand Midtjylland in a way, aren't they? Like it's all set pieces, throw-ins, two big strikers up front, and that. So that
yeah,
could
it is
be,
very effective, isn't it? I think they were excellent in the semi against Motherwell. Just kind of blew them away. So
yeah.
it's interesting with the sort of dynamic that we'll face them again in what 2-3 weeks time in the final as well. So we'll see if that has any bearing. Um, just going to finish off with a lineup quiz from a previous St Mirren Celtic game. We go back to, let me just see, the 20th of October 2012. So the lineup quiz, both Scott and Stuart will have two lives. They can name a player that was either in the starting lineup or on the subs bench. It doesn't matter if they came on or not, just as long as they were in the squad. So let me see. Scott, do you want to go first?
Uh, what was the scoreline of the game?
Oh. This is where you would try
You're
and trip
allowed to
up and see
tell us
who
that.
scored. Yeah, Celtic won 5-0. So St Mirren 0, Celtic 5.
And it was at St Mirren.
Yes, I'll give you another clue. It was when Celtic had that lovely black kit, the one that had the tricolour sleeves when you turn them up. So I don't know if that helps you any to visualise the goals and
See, I feel
events.
like just every time we do one from this rough Lennon one era, I probably just say the same names in the same order every time and just cross my fingers. But I'm just going to say Hooper.
Yes, he was one of the goal scorers.
Stokes.
Another one of the goal scorers.
Ledley?
Let me see, Ledley, yes. In fact, Stokes wasn't a goal scorer, but he played.
Forest.
Forest. Let me see. No, he wasn't.
GDB.
Interesting.
Samaras?
Samaras.
Too late.
No, he wasn't.
Adam Matthews.
Yes.
Wanyama.
Yes, he scored two. One of them was an absolute peach. Curled it from outside the box.
I'll say Forster.
Yes.
Uh, so if Matthews played then, Izagiri?
Yes, he was a substitute.
I want to say you've said Ledley, haven't you?
Hmm.
Commons?
Commons, no.
No,
So by that,
that's game over.
Scott is the winner. So I'll just run through the team. So we had Foster, Matthews, Lustig came on for Matthews,
Nice.
Kelvin Wilson as a Giri came on for him, Charlie Mulgrew, Effie Ambrose, Victor Wanyama, Joe Ledley, Biram Kayal,
I was going to say
Lassad.
Kyle. That's the one
Remember
that was on
Lassad?
my
Lassad Nui Nui.
GDB.
Miku,
Fucking hell,
Cooper,
what they started.
what? Lassad started, yeah. Um, we had Zaluska, Ronya, Paddy McCourt, Stokes, and Rabiu Ibrahim.
Wow.
There we go.
Lassad state of affairs.
Very good. Right, I think we'll leave it there. As we've said, the eyes are on the AGM tomorrow, 10:30 at Celtic Park. Interesting, Stuart, as you mentioned, that the banners are the cladding is up in time for that, and I noticed there was a video of the Christmas trees and all that going up as well. The cynic in me would say it's like when there is. I remember I used to work in another career when I worked in an office, and the big bosses would come. There would be like a paint, and there'd be carpets, etc. done. It's kind of polishing a turd.
Very much so. Very much so. My big concern about tomorrow is that nothing will happen, but hopefully I'm proved wrong and maybe it'll be a whirlwind few hours for us, but let's see.
Yes. Scott, your kind of closing thoughts?
Yeah, just the psychology of it is going to be really interesting. Even just the little bit of gossip we've had recently about whether Michael Nicholson would sort of be the scapegoat, if I was even going to be a scapegoat. I'd be. There's been a lot of comments about just how invisible he's been lately, so I would very much be interested to sort of zone in on him and see what kind of how prominent a role he's going to play in it. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to say the least. I think even the fact it's taking place in the morning is quite unusual, is it not? Is it not usually afternoon?
I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure how it normally goes. That just kind of shows that there is a lot more interest in it. And yeah, the other kind of dynamic I was thinking is I wondered if O'Neill's press conference would be today because the AGM tomorrow, but maybe he'll do a press conference from the AGM or whatever.
I absolutely hate that he's having to carry the can for all this and that he'll have to answer questions about the manager and he'll have to answer questions about the AGM and he'll have to answer questions about where the club's going. It's like, it's shite.
Barry, like, do you think he'll actually be there in his like club suit kind of thing?
O'Neill?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the manager's normally there,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, he
yeah,
normally
but
sits in
I'm
town.
just wondering if it'd be different with an interim. Like that would be a friend
maybe,
off
yeah, maybe
spot
not.
to put him in.
Should
Yeah,
find
it's
out
So if he
if
turns
probably,
up in his wee trackie.
yeah.
should find out if Darren O'Day's going to the Swansea AGM. That's the way to find out.
Got a smoking gun.
Real quiz.
That's interesting, actually. Maybe he won't be. Maybe they would keep him separate. Because as Stuart says, it's unfair to put him through that when
They don't seem to mind about that though.
Yeah.
he's essentially doing the club a favour, isn't he? But yeah, time will tell. But this has been the Cynic Weekly. Stuart Dugan, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Barry.
Scott Fleming, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
So this has been the Cynic Weekly. I've been your host Barry Gallagher with Scott Fleming, Stuart Dugan, and we'll speak to you down the road.